The Xyrellon Inquiry, a sleek silver vessel the size of a city block, floated silently above Earth's atmosphere, hidden behind layers of cloaking fields and sensor dampeners. On board, a crew of highly trained scientists and explorers from across the Zixara Union moved with quiet purpose. For centuries, they had catalogued thousands of life forms across the galaxy, some majestic, others terrifying, but all followed a predictable biological logic. Earth, the blue planet spinning below them, was supposed to be another routine entry in their galactic archive. But as the ship's scanners began their sweep, focusing on a hospital in New York City, something strange happened. The console lights blinked red. Alarms began to hum, and Chief Medical Analyst Trixel's voice trembled as she stared at the readouts. "Captain Vexrel, you need to see this." Captain Vexrel, tall and calm with shimmering emerald skin, stepped forward, expecting some minor irregularity. But as his eyes moved over the data, immune responses firing constantly, bacterial colonies thriving inside the host, cancerous cell activity not only present but tolerated, his expression changed from confusion to pure disbelief. "Is this normal for them?" he asked. Trixel nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. "Yes, Captain. These readings match across thousands of individuals. Their biology is a chaos engine." The scans showed bodies healing broken bones in weeks, surviving viruses that would wipe out entire Zixara colonies, and adapting to environmental extremes in ways that defied known science. One man in a hospital had a metal rod inside his leg, and he was walking. Another had survived a heart attack twice. Children ran fevers that should have been lethal, yet played the next day like nothing had happened. It was madness. The crew gathered in the observation hall, eyes wide as more results flooded in. Human muscles broke themselves to grow stronger. Their skin hardened when exposed to friction and heat. Their immune systems didn't just fight diseases, they learned from them. "They infect themselves on purpose," muttered assistant biologist Zelny, watching footage of a vaccination clinic. Why? No one had an answer. But worse was the psychological data coming in. Humans were social, emotional, but also aggressive, unpredictable, and terrifyingly resilient. They could form bonds with creatures far outside their species, even raise predators as pets. The ship's AI, after compiling thousands of cultural samples, delivered a simple summary: high emotional adaptability, high pain tolerance, high survival instinct, high probability of catastrophic retaliation if provoked. Captain Vexrel called an emergency meeting. "This is not a species to observe casually," he said. "If they breach into galactic space before we understand them, it could cause a spiral we're not ready for. Begin containment protocol. Flag Earth as a biological hazard." But before the orders could be carried out, a ripple of unease spread across the room. The scans had detected something else, something impossible. The humans were aware of the Xyrellon Inquiry. Not directly, not through vision or sound, but subtly. One technician had spotted a man looking straight at a cloaked satellite, his brow furrowed in suspicion. Another woman on a night walk paused suddenly and stared directly into the sky where the ship was hovering, as if feeling its presence. "Their senses shouldn't reach us," whispered Trixel, "but it's like they know." The captain's voice dropped to a near whisper. "We need to leave orbit. Now." But it was already too late. A signal pinged from Earth. Not a greeting, not a threat. Just a simple, deliberate transmission from a lone computer lab in rural Alaska. It read, "We see you." For the first time in his long and decorated career, Captain Vexrel felt something he'd never experienced before while studying a primitive world: fear. Earth was no ordinary planet. And humans were no ordinary species. Something was deeply wrong, or perhaps terrifyingly right, with their biology. The mission was no longer scientific. It was about survival. Staff Sergeant Juno Reyes had always known she wasn't like most people. Growing up in the cold streets of Anchorage, Alaska, she had learned to walk barefoot in snow, fight through sickness without complaint, and hike through mountains carrying more weight than most would even attempt. So when the message came, an invitation labeled as intergalactic diplomacy, she didn't hesitate. She volunteered. No one believed it was real, of course. Her commanding officer laughed, called it a prank. But when the skies opened and the shimmering outline of a ship appeared just outside the military base, all doubts vanished. Juno stepped forward with calm confidence and disappeared in a beam of light. On board the Xyrelan Inquiry, the crew watched her arrival with fascination and quiet dread. She stood still on the transporter platform, eyes sharp, posture relaxed, showing no fear. The ship's interior temperature was kept cool by Sixori standards, barely above freezing by human measures, but Juno didn't flinch. In fact, she looked comfortable. When a thin layer of frost formed beneath her feet, and she didn't even blink, some crew members began whispering. It was their first direct contact with a human, and already things weren't going as expected. They had brought her aboard for observation, under the assumption that her biology, though dangerous, could be studied safely. Juno, ever the soldier, played along, curious and alert. She walked the metallic corridors barefoot, ran her hand across glowing panels, and asked questions that suggested she understood far more than she should. When a group of scientists tried to guide her toward the medical bay, she went without protest, lying calmly under the scanner as dozens of sensors began to analyze her. That's when things began to go wrong. The medical A's voice, usually calm and clinical, suddenly spiked in pitch. Warning: biological systems incompatible. Subject is generating internal thermal spikes. Heart rate remains stable. Neural activity increasing. Classification: hostile adaptive organism. The words sent a chill through the crew. Hostile. The subject was just lying there, breathing steadily. But the AI insisted. Juno's immune system was already responding to the ship's atmosphere. Her body had begun forming resistance to airborne particles it hadn't even encountered before. Muscles showed micro-tears that were already healing, stronger than before. Blood work revealed trace elements of dozens of past infections. All survived. A subdermal analysis picked up fragments of a broken bone that had reset without medical aid. She should be in pain, whispered a technician. But Juno simply looked around the lab, studying them in return, like a lion calmly watching a group of mice. Then came the temperature test. As part of routine scans, the AI lowered the room to sub-zero Celsius to simulate potential planetary environments. Most species would react instantly. Juno sat up, stretched her arms, and cracked her neck like she was about to go for a morning jog. One alien fainted. Another dropped his datapad. She smiled. Bit chilly. Got any coffee? No one responded. The captain was called. Vextril arrived, his face unreadable, and stared at the human specimen in silence. Juno stood calmly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. So, she said, is this the part where you tell me I've been chosen for something important? Vextril didn't answer. He turned to the AI. Send the recordings to the Galactic Council. Flag it Priority 1. The AI obeyed without question. A ripple spread across the stars as the data reached Council worlds. Representatives from over 50 species watched in stunned silence as the footage played. A human completely unaffected by alien stimuli, adapting in real time, showing signs of unpredictable evolution and extreme biological plasticity. Some called her a miracle, others a mistake of nature. Back on the Xyrelan Inquiry, the crew gave Juno a temporary room and kept their distance. She hummed an old song from Earth while stretching on the cold metal floor, her breath misting the air. She wasn't afraid. In fact, she was curious about the ship, about the aliens, about how far she could push herself. But the aliens were no longer curious. They were afraid, and somewhere deep in the ship, Captain Vextril whispered to himself, "We didn't bring her here to learn about humans. We brought her here to make sure they never reach us." But looking at Juno now, he wasn't sure if that was still possible. Deep within the lower levels of the Xyrelan Inquiry, where the lights were dim and silence ruled, a different kind of curiosity was growing. While most of the crew had begun to fear the human they called Subject Juno, one scientist saw her not as a threat, but as the greatest opportunity of his career. Dr. Krelith, a xenobiologist with a controversial past and a mind sharpened by obsession, believed the human body was the key to unlocking evolutionary control. He had read every file, watched every test, and come to a dangerous conclusion. Observation was not enough. He needed to see what lay beneath the surface. Ethics protocols, council directives, and crew safety were all second to his goal. He waited until the ship's main systems entered recharge mode and security cycles were slow. Juno, asleep in her holding quarters under light sedation, was easy to relocate. He brought her to Lab Theta, isolated, soundproof, and off the ship's main grid. There, under artificial lights and sterile fields, he prepared for an illegal procedure that could end everything. Juno's body lay still, but her vitals told another story. Her heart rate stayed strong. Muscles twitched faintly. The alien sedatives, calculated for species 10 times her mass, were barely holding her under. Krelith dismissed the warning signs. He injected a stronger dose, mixed with a paralytic not yet approved for council use. For a moment, her readings dropped. Satisfied, he began the incision protocol. A sterilized surgical beam moved toward her shoulder, only to be met with sudden resistance. The beam stuttered, then shut off completely. Krelith cursed, thinking it was equipment failure, and adjusted the focus. As the second beam touched her skin, something incredible happened. Her immune system reacted instantly. Cells multiplied at a speed the scanners couldn't track. White blood cells surrounded the foreign compounds and neutralized them. In seconds, the skin began to harden, forming a dense barrier, organic, but stronger than any material the lab had encountered. Krelith stumbled back in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered, eyes wide. Then Juno's eyes opened. Not slowly or confused, but sharp, focused, and aware. Her muscles tensed. The paralysis didn't work. She sat up with a controlled breath and looked at Krelith like a hunter spotting prey. "Was this supposed to be a checkup?" she asked, her voice cold and steady. Krelith reached for the emergency containment switch, but it was too late. Juno stood, tore off the scanner bands like paper, and moved toward him with terrifying precision. Security alarms triggered across the deck. Guards scrambled, but the doors to Lab Theta were locked. Inside, Krelith tried to fire a low-level laser to subdue her. It grazed her shoulder and left only a red mark that began fading within minutes. Juno winced, but didn't stop. With a force that shocked even her, she shoved the lab table aside and cornered the scientist. "You tried to cut me open," she said quietly. "Let's talk about why." By the time Captain Vextrail arrived with his command team, the lab was wrecked. Panels were torn from walls. Equipment sparked, and Juno stood unharmed, holding Krelith's data slate in one hand. She handed it over calmly. "Your guy went rogue," she said, as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "Might want to screen your staff better." Her shoulder still bore the burn mark, but only faintly. The onboard AI registered tissue recovery at a rate 500% faster than any species previously studied. The captain looked at her, then at the restrained xenobiologist, who muttered incoherently about miracles and weaponized DNA. Vextrail turned back to Juno. "Why didn't you kill him?" he asked. Juno shrugged. "I'm human. We don't start with killing, but we finish with it, if we have to." The ship fell silent that night. Rumors spread quickly. The woman who healed in hours, who couldn't be sedated, who fought like a machine and walked away without a scar. What was she made of? How far could she go? No one had answers, but one thing was clear now. Humans weren't just strange. They were built for survival in a way no one could explain. And Juno Reyes had just shown them that dissecting a human wasn't science. It was suicide. After the failed dissection incident, Captain Vextrail made a new decision. No more restraints, no more hidden labs. If they wanted to understand the human species, They would need to observe one in her natural state, or at least something close to it. And so, the crew of the Zillerellen Inquiry built a controlled environment deep within the ship's research wing, temperature, gravity, and oxygen carefully adjusted to mimic Earth's conditions. Juno Reyes was informed she could use the space freely, and while the captain avoided the word experiment, everyone knew what this really was, a test. But Juno didn't care. She stretched, yawned, and walked into the simulation room like she was checking into a gym back home. The walls were lined with observation windows. The crew, that is still uneasy, watched silently as she examined the environment. Weights were placed in one corner, a sleek chamber in another. Food replicators had been adapted for her dietary needs. Or so they thought. In the first hour, Juno ignored the sleeping area and walked straight to the weights. They were designed to track exertion and resistance. She picked up one that weighed more than twice her body mass. At first, the crew assumed it was a mistake. The weight should have required assistive tech or exosuit support. But Juno lifted it cleanly, slowly, and with control. She repeated the movement again and again, sweat forming across her brow, muscles tightening. Her face showed effort, but not pain. The science team grew quiet. After an hour, her arms were visibly shaking, and her muscles should have reached failure. But instead of stopping, Juno added more weight. She continued, her breathing steady, eyes focused. After 3 hours, she finally dropped the bar with a heavy thud, rolled her shoulders, and muttered, "Not bad." The next phase was endurance. No sleep, limited food, a changing environment. For 3 Earth-standard days, the room's lights never dimmed, and the temperature shifted from cold to heat. Juno stayed active, pacing, training, even meditating. The sleep chamber remained untouched. The crew watched in disbelief as she pushed herself without rest. Her heartbeat stayed strong. Brain activity remained stable. The medical AI noted brief microsleeps, seconds of rapid recovery while she blinked or sat still, but no traditional rest cycle occurred. By hour 72, her body should have been collapsing. Instead, she sat cross-legged in the center of the room, calmly sharpening a stick she'd carved from a piece of workout equipment. "She is resting while awake?" asked First Officer Nixel. "No, she's managing her resources," replied the ship's science officer, Dr. Alari. "This isn't survival instinct. This is discipline. Strategy." Then came the food test. Juno had requested something with heat. The crew, unsure what she meant, analyzed her flavor preferences and offered a replicated dish based on human spicy cuisine. The food was placed in a steel alloy bowl designed to withstand high temperatures. Within moments of contact, the spice compound corroded the utensil's edge. Crew members scrambled to stop her, but Juno just laughed, picked up the bowl, and began eating with her hands. "Tastes like home," she said through a mouthful. Her digestive scan showed no signs of distress, just a brief increase in body temperature and a spike in endorphins. Dr. Alari clutched her data slate, trembling. "They eat poison, for fun." The logs grew stranger with each passing hour. Human biology, it seemed, thrived on stress. Their muscles tore and healed stronger. Their minds sharpened under pressure. Their habits, fasting, extreme heat, sleep deprivation, even controlled injury, were not signs of weakness, but methods of growth. "They adapt by breaking," Alari said quietly, eyes wide. "They damage themselves to evolve. This is not science. This is madness." Nearby, an intern whispered, "Pain is optional to them." Silence followed. And Juno. She stood at the far side of the room, now doing handstand push-ups against a wall, humming a tune from Earth, smiling to herself. She didn't know what they were saying about her, but if she did, she probably wouldn't care. Because to her, this wasn't strange. This was normal. And to the crew of the Zillerellen Inquiry, normal had never been so terrifying. Far from the Zillerellen Inquiry, in the heart of the galaxy's most secure region, the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives of over 100 intelligent species filled the colossal hall, tall reptilians with shimmering scales, creatures made of gas contained in floating spheres, crystalline beings whose bodies chimed softly as they moved. At the center of it all, a giant projector displayed live footage from the Xyrellan inquiry, now classified as Priority Red. The topic, humanity. More specifically, one human, Staff Sergeant Juno Reyes. Her recent actions had not only broken protocols, but broken the understanding of what was biologically possible. As the footage played, Juno lifting heavy weights, enduring days without sleep, healing rapidly, and consuming substances that corroded alien metals, the room fell into stunned silence. Then came the final straw, an interview clip. Juno sat in a simulated environment, speaking casually to the ship's communication AI, unaware the feed was being sent to the highest levels of galactic government. "Oh yeah," she was saying, "we do all kinds of extreme stuff. Mountain climbing with no ropes, swimming with sharks, jumping from planes thousands of feet up. Some people even run into burning buildings for a living. We call them firefighters. It's kind of normal back home." The hall went silent for a long moment. Then the Centauri ambassador, a delicate creature evolved from prey species, gave a startled gasp and collapsed to the floor. Her aides rushed forward as panic spread through her delegation. The idea of willingly jumping from a flying vehicle was too much. "Did she say, for fun?" someone whispered. Across the room, others stared at the screen in disbelief. The Gernic delegate, whose species had outlawed physical competition centuries ago, muttered, "They're not just durable, they're insane." Council leader Ma Ven, an ancient being of pure energy, rose slowly from the central pedestal. "Let the debate begin," it said, its voice echoing in every mind. And so the shouting began. The groan demanded immediate quarantine. Humans are a biological threat, Class 10 potential. If they ever reach our worlds unchecked, they could destabilize everything. The Centauri delegation argued for diplomatic contact. They are intelligent, cooperative. The human in the footage showed restraint. That is a sign of possible alliance. The Vrexan ambassador, who had watched entire worlds fall to biowarfare, slammed a fist on the table. They adapt through self-damage. What kind of creature breaks itself to grow stronger? What happens when they weaponize that biology? Dr. Alari's report was then read aloud, her words now infamous. They thrive on adversity. Their evolution is fueled by chaos. Pain, to them, is not a signal to stop, it's a challenge to overcome. Meanwhile, other species try to find balance. "Not all humans are like this Juno," said the Ryle ambassador. "She's a soldier, trained for extremes. Let us not judge the whole by one example." But someone else quickly countered with a list of Earth activities: marathon races, combat sports, exploration of deadly environments, survival games, even horror entertainment. "Their culture worships struggle," said one voice. "They don't avoid fear, they chase it." The debate dragged for hours. Every argument made things worse. Fear clashed with fascination. Threat assessments updated in real time. Suggestions ranged from containment zones on Earth to immediate inclusion into the galactic community, as a strategic ally, if not a friend. But when the second video played, Juno smiling calmly as she described skydiving, wingsuit flying, and a friend who once broke both legs and still went back to the mountains, it caused a fresh wave of panic. "They seek damage," said the Hanoth speaker in disbelief. "This species, they rewrite every rule." In the end, no decision was reached. The council recessed without a clear path forward. Some delegates refused to return to their homeworlds, fearing humans might already be traveling beyond Earth. Others demanded the Xyrellan inquiry return immediately with or without Juno on board. But in the back corners of the chamber, where strategy and secrecy lived, a new idea was quietly forming. Maybe humans shouldn't be feared or avoided. Maybe they should be studied more or brought closer. Because if a species could survive like that, fight like that, and laugh through it all. Perhaps in the dark corners of the galaxy, they were exactly what the universe needed, or what it would never survive. The mood aboard the Xyrellan Inquiry had shifted. No longer a place of scientific exploration, the ship now felt like a prison in orbit. Juno Reyes could sense it, the way guards watched her movements more closely, how even the friendlier crew members grew quiet when she entered a room, and the way doors took just a little too long to unlock when she approached. After the Galactic Council's debate, the ship received new instructions. Prepare the human for secure transport to a classified facility, one that wasn't on Earth. They called it diplomatic containment, but Juno saw through the polished words. They feared her. Not just her strength or her biology, but what she represented. And if they were this scared of one human, she could only imagine what they'd do if they ever saw the rest of the species. That's when she decided she wasn't going to let them decide humanity's fate behind closed doors. Earth deserved a voice in this madness, and she wasn't going to sit around while people who'd never set foot on her planet made choices that could erase it from the stars. Juno's escape didn't begin with brute force, but with a conversation. She'd spent weeks observing the crew, who followed rules, who bent them, who asked questions instead of giving orders. One of them was a junior systems engineer named Olin, a jelly-limbed technician with a nervous habit of humming when thinking. He admired her in quiet ways, slipping her extra protein supplements, adjusting room temperatures to Earth norms. He believed in cooperation, not fear. When Juno finally asked him for help, he hesitated, but only for a moment. They're planning to move you to a deep-core moon, he whispered. That's not diplomacy, that's exile. That was all she needed to hear. With Olin's help, and a few other quiet allies on board, Juno learned the ship's security systems and hacked her way past biometric locks using a combination of ship tools and, disturbingly, her own dried blood and saliva, which the ship still couldn't fully analyze. She moved quickly, wearing a stolen engineer's coat, her hair tied back, walking with purpose. The ship's layout was etched into her mind after weeks of pacing. Her destination, the emergency escape hangar. It wasn't the most stable method, but it had a direct launch path and a small scout-class vessel equipped with manual controls. Perfect for a getaway. But before she left, she had something to say. She accessed the ship's internal broadcast network and recorded a message plain and raw, with no filters or soft diplomacy. This is Staff Sergeant Juno Reyes of Earth. Yeah, I'm human. I know you've seen the videos, the council talks, the reports. I know we seem scary. We're tough, weird, sometimes reckless, but we're not monsters. We don't want war. We want connection. So if you've got questions, come talk to us. On Earth. No labs, no cages, just a conversation. You want to understand us? Look us in the eye. Until then, I'm going home. Her message was sent to every deck, every station, every ship monitoring the Xyrellan Inquiry. Then she climbed into the vessel, powered it up, and blasted away. By the time the crew responded, she was already out of sensor range. The escape was chaos. Alarms blared, command staff yelled across comms, and fighter drones scrambled, but none could catch her. Within hours, she was gone. Just a blip on the scanners, heading back to Earth. What followed was nothing short of a galactic storm. News of her escape spread faster than light. The Council was furious. Half the galaxy was terrified, the other half fascinated. Memes exploded across the networks. Animated versions of Juno eating molten metal snacks, lifting spaceships, or outrunning warp drives. But the most popular one was simple. A confused alien screaming, "What the hell is wrong with human biology?" In bold, flashing letters. It was funny, ridiculous, and also painfully accurate. And on Earth, satellites caught a small craft entering orbit. A human voice crackled through old radios and open signals. Permission to come home. Earth answered with cheers. The galaxy had questions, but now, Juno Reyes had thrown down the gauntlet. Humanity would answer, but on their own terms. Months had passed since Juno Reyes disappeared into the black of space, leaving behind a galactic council in chaos and a single message that echoed through every corner of civilized star systems. During that time, Earth went from being an obscure blue planet to the most talked-about world in the galaxy. Every species, from the ancient and wise to the young and curious, began sending covert drones to observe humans in their natural environment. What they saw only deepened the mystery. Humans danced in storms, played games where they were hit repeatedly with balls, climbed cliffs with no safety gear, and laughed while doing it. They competed in icy waters, ran marathons across deserts, boxed with bare fists, and launched themselves into space on explosions they called rockets. Even their children performed feats that most council species considered emergency-level physical trauma. And still, the humans smiled. The council watched all of it, unsure if they were witnessing the rise of allies or the awakening of a new galactic predator. Eventually, the decision was made. Not through fear, but strategy. The galaxy was vast, full of threats not yet understood. Piracy had increased in border sectors. Civil wars brewed on distant moons. A species that could survive anything and smile through it might just be exactly what was needed to bring order, or at least deterrence. So, with carefully worded language and a dozen diplomatic layers, Earth was invited to join the Galactic Council, not as a protected world under observation, but as a potential peacekeeping force. The message was formal, respectful, and just slightly nervous in tone. When the signal reached Earth, it triggered celebrations and debates. But for Juno Reyes, who had been living quietly back home, training soldiers and ignoring reporters, it meant only one thing: time to finish what she started. Her return to the Galactic Council chamber was not quiet. Every seat was filled. News drones hovered at every corner. Delegates leaned forward, translators humming softly in the background. She stepped into the room not as a specimen or prisoner, but as Earth's first ambassador to the stars. She didn't wear a traditional suit or robe. Instead, she arrived in a modified Earth military uniform, sleeves rolled, boots scuffed, and a calm, confident smile on her face. There was a pause as she reached the center of the chamber. Some expected a long speech, maybe something poetic, but Juno was still Juno. She looked around at the nervous, fascinated faces and said with a half grin, "Don't worry. We only break things when we have to." A few delegates laughed. Some flinched. Most just stared. That single line was enough to echo across half the galaxy. Within days, it was printed on T-shirts, used in memes, quoted in debates. Galactic linguists tried to analyze the humor and subtle threat in her tone. Analysts argued over its deeper meaning. Was it a warning? A reassurance? Or just human? Behind the scenes, negotiations began. Earth was offered a trial seat on the council. Delegates were invited to visit Earth in person, though most declined after seeing footage of volcano tourism and base jumping. Still, a few brave ones accepted. One Centauri diplomat fainted on a roller coaster. A Plorian scientist cried after watching a childbirth documentary. But none denied what they saw. Humans were resilient, endlessly adaptable, and absolutely unlike any other species. They learned fast. They bonded deeply, and when pushed, they pushed back harder. Juno's presence reminded them of that. She spoke plainly in every meeting, offered blunt observations, and occasionally sipped black coffee that made 3 translators short-circuit from the smell alone. And yet, progress happened. Old enemies paused their fights to consider Earth's role. Treaties began to shift. The Council started whispering of a new balance, one with humans not just as members, but as guardians. Not because they were perfect, but because when everything else failed, humans didn't quit. They got back up, again and again. As Juno looked out over the chamber, surrounded by beings from hundreds of worlds, she understood something. This wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about showing up, surviving, growing. That was humanity's real power. And now the stars were watching.